an institution which has its own board, so it's not part of the ministry, but we get our funding from the ministry. And it implements the Danish strategy for culture and development, which is called the Right to Art and Culture, and I'll come back to that. And it was approved by the Danish Parliament in May 2013, and hopefully they will still work with it after we have this selection and a new government, so I cross my fingers. Being part of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and not the Ministry of Culture means that CKU is a development organization working with the arts as a tool for change in the Danish development aid programs in the Middle East, Asia, and Africa, and in close collaboration with Danish representations and partners. So, unlike, for example, the Goethe Institute or the British Council, we are not working with promoting Danish art abroad, but actually working the other way around, promoting arts from abroad in Denmark and also working with the arts internationally. So, let me see. So, what is so special about this Danish strategy? The objective of the strategy is to contribute to combating poverty, strengthening democracy, and building peace by promoting the universal realization of the right to partake in culture and freedom of expression in conformity with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and promotion of the diversity of cultural expressions. Through a right-based approach, the strategy promotes a dialogue-oriented and inclusive agenda where the emphasis is on collaboration, reconciliation, establishing trust, and mutual understanding. So it's human right-based, and it's an element in overall Danish development cooperation, so it should be part of all the programs that Denmark participates in. And art, it's because we believe that art and culture embody some of the fundamental qualities of being human, such as creativity, expression, communication, and sociality. These aspects are important building blocks for people and societies to combat poverty, build peace, and promote human rights and democratic development. The ability to solve problems, exercise one's voice, engage in public debate, and build social capital are capabilities and assets that are essential to the process of empowerment. So the Danish development support has a focus to support culture and activities that have the potential to strengthen these capabilities and assets. And this is how we work. So, and this is a map, and I'm sorry it's in Danish, but it shows the countries that we are engaged with. We work in the Middle East, West and East Africa, and Asia, and it's not all of the countries in these regions, but the countries we work with are decided by the embassies, the Danish embassies who wanted to get engaged. So it's in the Middle East, it's Palestine and Egypt. In West Africa, it's Mali, Burkina Faso, Ghana, and in East Africa, it's Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania. And we've been working in Afghanistan. The reason why that is yellow is because we are sort of phasing out our programs, and also in Bhutan and Vietnam. And we've just launched a program in Pakistan, Nepal, Myanmar, and Indonesia. So these countries are our main focus. So how is the strategy realized? land programs are formulated based on analysis, including human rights analysis and needs assessments made by in-country consultants. So before a program starts, there is a lot of work being done. And of course, it's also on previous experiences from working with development aid. Then there is extensive consultations with key players, beneficiaries and stakeholders, so working with partners in the country. And that's quite new, I think, because earlier it was very much about having Danish partners implementing in the country. So it's a new way of working from within. And then assessment of and dialogue with local implementing partners. So it's a lot about finding partners in the regions where we work. And as I was talking about before, why do we think art and culture can work as a development tool? Participating in activities strengthening the voice and creativity, and it encouraged participants to become active contributors to social and economic development. So it's very much about empowermenting the societies. And then it's also about enhancing social cohesion through processes of group-based artistic production and improving skills levels to increase job opportunities and job creation, which can contribute to sustain peace in post-conflict places. And I think this image is taken from the exhibition Afghan Tales, and under the extremely conservative Taliban regime from 1996 to 2001, cultural expressions were forbidden and practically non-existent in Afghanistan. Bringing art and culture back into the country has begun. And CKU, the Danish embassy in Kabul, chose to focus on activities for young people that could increase their job opportunities and provide them with free spaces and access to participate in creative and social activities. One of these activities was initiating a network with the aim of giving Afghan photographers a chance to present Afghanistan and all its nuances from their perspective, but also focusing on enhancing business and network opportunity for Afghan photographies, both women and men. And we have one of the partners here, if anybody wants to talk more about it. Really interesting project. And in order to extend the collaboration with the Afghan photographers, there was this Afghan Tale exhibition made, and it was launched in 2014 in New York. Then it has been shown in Copenhagen, and it's traveling around Europe now. It's going to be shown in Göteborg hopefully soon. So that's sort of one part. CKU has a double mandate, so we are working internationally, and that's sort of our 70% of our focus is there, and then we have about 30% of our focus in Denmark. And so we're working, communicating about the art from these regions with 3 different tools. And one tool is Images, which is the largest event in Denmark on promoting contemporary art from the global art scene. And then we have Images Youth, which is inviting artists from non-Western countries to facilitate workshops about art, culture and creativity in Danish schools. And then the third part is an art fund, which is supporting artists from low-income countries. And I think there's about 60 countries on the list we're working with at the moment to perform and show their art in Denmark in cooperation with Danish artists and or cultural institutions. But to come back, so that was sort of giving you an idea of what CKU is. To come back to images, because that has been the main way of promoting or talking about global arts in Denmark for the last 25 years. It started in 1991, and several thousand artists from more than 60 countries in Africa, Latin America, and the Middle East and Asia has presented their artworks at different images festivals. And as I was reading into the old festivals, I fell over this quite interesting, I think, quote saying, in the 90s, drum rhythms, tribal dance got the Danes out on the streets to experience traditional African culture. Up to 500,000 people watched the culture caravan when it went through 25 Danish cities in the images of Africa's month-long nomadic journey. So imagine that back in 1991 there was this summer with an African caravan moving through Denmark. And of course, and then this was a huge success, so there was 3 other images of Africa. And there has been afterwards a geographical change to images of Asia and images of the Middle East. However, looking back, did these events create more understanding and intercultural dialogue, or did they foster a biased gaze on people from other continents? It's difficult to say. What became obvious, though, was that it did not change to do a lot of change on the Danish art scene, and the audiences did not show the same interest in the later festivals as they did in the early ones. However, this is sort of putting it very much on the spot because it has had a very important impact, especially on in the music scene, because these festivals were they had all art genres, and the world music scene is very strong in Denmark, both in the Roskilde Festival and the Copenhagen Jazz Festival. So I'm sort of putting things a bit on the spot. In 2010, a new Images Festival era started. At My World Images, it was called My World Images, and instead of presenting art from specific regions, the art was created in cooperation between Nordic artists and artists from the south. The last Images Festival was Occupying Utopia in 2013, and the events were taking place in the cities of Copenhagen, Aarhus, and Aalborg. So the festivals have been running every third year, and it has been, the first one was for a month, but or else it has been for around 10 days, so it's a lot of effort going in to a very short time. And there was, of course, an evaluation after the last one, and I'm giving you the not very sort of flattering version of it, because it said that, well, the title or the theme was Occupying Utopia was a theme that should research Europe as an utopia for immigrants. However, it was criticized for being too elitist for the average Danish audience and not relevant enough from the perspective of development work. However, the worst part, maybe, was that the festival went over the budget and had too few audiences or participants. From starting in the 90s with 500,000 visitors, and then in 2013 only reaching about 50,000 taxpayers, the question became, has images a role to play today? So we had to rethink, should it be an event like CKU was producing everything? We used the money on renting toilets, scenes, technicians, or could we use the money better in another way? Was it connected to the CKU strategy? And of course it weren't, because the strategy is from 2013 and the last festival was in 2013. So it can only forward-thinking be part of the strategy. And what about sustainability? All these festivals we have had, there has been a new crew, so we invented the plate for the first time every time. So we would like to have more sustainability, and should it embrace all art genre? And what about quality was also an important question. So we came up with some thoughts. We wanted more synergy and focus, so there should be a stronger synergy between CKU's international engagement and the activities in images, and there should be more focus on partnership development. And we should invite non-Western perspectives on art and culture for increased understanding and enrichment of our work, because it was in the other festivals, it was Danes who was curating the festival without having the voices of the global scene. And then we should strengthen our knowledge base to ensure that our work is relevant. So hopefully we'll reach a much greater audience again. And then we chose to have the focus on visual arts. And it's actually because the visual art scene is very much working outside its own genre. It's like we saw the first day here, performance is an important part, video art is an important part. There was a reading yesterday with literature, so sort of the visual arts are working in other genres as well, so we thought it would be good to focus on that. So what is the new vision? The vision is to give international curators, artists and institutions from CKU focus regions a greater role and a voice in the development and execution of the images programs. And what I forgot to say is that it's no longer just 10 days, it's running for a whole year. So it starts in January and it ends in December. So the idea with the Biennale is that it will run all year, every second year, so it will become, in that way, a global year. To ensure that it reflects on current and actual artistic currents and tendency and discourses, and is in touch with the new voices and emerging talents within the regions. And to support the garnering of experience and networks and develop through images back into the cultural life in the focus region. So having a focus on the Danish programs also to be part of this development thought. So we, to do this, we invited an images panel to be our dialogue partners, and we have hired them for 2 years in 15 and 16, and then the idea is when we have the next Biennale in 18, we'll have a new panel. And it's Ade from Indonesia, who is an artist and curator, and he's running a collective called Ruang Grupa. And it's Sarah Rifki from Egypt, who's a curatorial agent and who has run different art centers in Egypt. And then Ngone Fall from Senegal. So we are trying in that way. Of course, we know that nobody can represent a whole continent, but it's a way of getting these voices into developing our program. And what role do they play? We also changed from Denmark, or from CKU being the ones executing the program. Now we're working with around 25 different cultural institutions, and this panel should be a resource group for these institutions, so having a dialogue with them and pointing to their network, so we could have Danish institutions working with different partners. And I'm just showing you a map of Denmark and some of the places where we will be next year. We're working with non-profit gallery, art spaces and museums who will produce the images programs. So it's not CKU saying what they should do, but making the network between the partners and having them develop a program that is relevant in their local community. And the reason why we work like this is to give the Danish cultural scene a ownership to the CKU mandate, or our vision. So all the institutions must partner with an international curator, and then in order to develop the content of their programs. And at the moment we have Ade Damawan from Indonesia, Sarah Rifki and Enoge Gonefal, which I mentioned before. And then we have Sangeeta Thapa from Nepal, who's working with Moskov, Alia Ryan, who you will hear later, who's hopefully going to work with maybe Kunsthal Nord. Now we're making all these partnerships and seeing what is working out. We have Obisi Sylvia from Nigeria, who's working with the Images Gallery in Aarhus, and Rasi Sadiq from Pakistan, who is working with Kunsten in Aalborg. And then Bonaventure oh, now I just forgot her name, but Bonaventure from Cameroon, he will be working with Solveig Ovesen on a huge project in Holbæk municipality, where they will be working both in the municipality but also in other parts of the Copenhagen region. And I'll just give you a short overview of some of the projects. In Holbæk, where Bonaventure and Solveig is working, they have made an exhibition concept called An Age of Our Own Making. And the first reflection they have, I think, between 5 or 10 reflections. It's called Recreating the Space in public space. And they'll be working with Ibrahim Mahamra, who is now here as a residency, in order to do a huge public work opening in May next year. And another example is Trapholt Museum, which will be curated by Ngone Fall, and she has made an exhibition called When Things Fall Apart, and it's about critical voices on the radar. And she's working very much with new voices on the art scene. And she's using more known artists to bring in these new voices. And she has 3 sub-themes: equal justice, about gender and sexuality, and social change, which is diversity and dialogue, and critical voices on political activism. And it's an image from Pascal Martin Taillou, who will probably be one of the artists you'll work with. And then we'll also be working with Råderum, who has the bus drive or the bus tour later, and they'll be making a art labs program, inviting artists and working with residencies, but I think you should talk to Charlotte about the what it will be, because we're still in the making. And Råderum is part of a dialogue program we are making, and we're doing the dialogue program because we think it's very important to have this critical voice as part of the exhibition. So looking at our own practice all the time to see if what we have learned and how we can become better and do the next images more relevant for the audiences and for the institutions. So it's about unfolding relevant discourses of the images exhibitions, but it's also to create this platform for thinking, and then most importantly, working or building these networks. And we are in dialogue with the Royal Danish Academy of Fine Arts, and they will hopefully do a program also lasting all year. So to achieve the aims, the dialogue program consists of 5 separate but interconnected components. We hope to do a 1-week curatorial practice art lab for 6 emerging curators, where they should work with the images programs as a case. And then we'll do the residence programs for artists. And then we hope to start up with a 1-day conference and end it all with a symposium in November. And maybe it will be part of the new Arts and Globalization. So, and why are we doing all this? Well, it is to strengthen our common knowledge base, but it's also very much to have documentation of art from the global south, from these new voices, because when we are out talking to curators, we have found out that they use a lot of resources doing the exhibitions, but they don't have the resources to make the documentation. And I think working with Danish institutions who almost always do catalogs and have other kinds of resources, I hope that we can make a new form of art history together. So I think this should be my final word.
Thank you very, very much, Christina. Fantastic, very interesting. Before I go into questioning Christina, I've been asked to ask the owner of a Volkswagen Touran, the AG 72454, to go out and move his or her car, because it's standing in the way for somebody else who can't get out and needs to get out in order to get to a meeting. So if it's anyone in this crowd that has that Volkswagen, please go out, and it's silver grey. So now you know. But coming back to you, Christina, because I think this rethinking images, or maybe even taking it a bit larger, rethinking CKU itself, in terms of how you present international and global art in a Danish context, with whom you do it, how you involve the partners, what role the international curators and artists are actually being given when asked to Copenhagen, is a very, very interesting one. I remember that very first, that's how old I am, I remember that very, very first Images Festival, and I was among these 500,000 people. At that time there was Belgian tents, mirror tents put in the great park, Fælledparken, and people were going there to dance to African music every night, and it was a great feast. But it was also kind of exotic. So it was a kind of exoticism, that it was in the institutions, it was in a tent, you can go and dance, you can go and watch, you can go and listen, but there was no real connection. At the Images of Africa Free, I was one of the programmers, and things didn't change, actually. And I have also been programming in the images of the Middle East, and, well, I've been around. But I think you kind of nailed it when you said there's been a decrease of 90% in terms of visitors and connection and participation. And that's kind of a signal. What can we do in order to get it much more into? But how has that been perceived? Because in many ways, images feeds perfectly in the old way into the Danish logic of been there, done that. We do our ticks. Oh, we do need to do something for the Latin American community. Let's make an exhibition. Then we've done it. So now you're changing everything, and you're actually asking people to go into collaboration and distribute power. Give the power to curators from the outside. How is that being perceived in the institutions?
I think, first of all, times has changed, so everybody wants to collaborate, and we're much more into networking, but at the same time, it is difficult to give up your power, especially if you're an institution and you're the one who has to sort of go back to your board, and you're the one having the head on the table if something is going wrong. So I think there is a lot of risk-taking from the institutions we work with, but they're also interested in learning new ideas, and the Danish art scene is in the middle of sort of where are we going, what should we be, how can we become more relevant to audiences, and I think we come with one of the answers. So the ones we have started a dialogue with really want to take part in it. And I think also the idea that we are now talking about, we start in 2016, we see it as a laboratory, so what happens here, we will work with it and become better in 2018. So it's also a way of thinking long term.
And long term, I mean, you've turned a month, then 10 days into a year.
Yeah.
So that long-term relationship, how does that actually work? When you're working with, let's say, Kunsten in Aalborg, how do you frame that one-year relationship? What's the processes that you engage in?
It's not all the institutions that will have an exhibition for a year, but so it's changing. Kunsten will start and have an exhibition, I think, for 4 months, and then there will be another venue will have an exhibition. So it's all over. It will become all year, but it will not be all year in every institution. So it's a way of thinking. Yeah, something's happening out there, and we don't have an opening and a closing event. So it's just things popping up in Denmark, and hopefully, working in a totally other way than it was before, where it's sort of we make fireworks and then it closes.
But then it's gone.
Yeah, and it's a bit scary and quite exciting how images will then be, if it will be seen as a brand or if we will be invisible. And maybe it doesn't matter if we are invisible. If our strategy works and the cultural institution starts thinking global, I think that's much more important. So.
But in order to make the cultural institution start thinking global, you need to some kind feed your strategy into their everyday practice, don't you?
Yeah.
So how do you do that? How do you make sure that they are actually not just receiving you and then doing their tick, but that it's a long term?
I think that's by doing this networking thing, by making Trapholt work within Gonet for a year and a half before they do the exhibition, and setting up Henrik from Kunsthal Nord with Aliyah Ryan, and hopefully they will make something in the fall next year, but they can sort of visit each other. So it's a way of matching institutions from different parts of the world and make them engage and hopefully get married.
That's your intention.
Yeah.
And I think that's all kind of respects for that. I think that's fantastic intention.
And we haven't seen if it's...
You haven't seen it work yet, so it's far too easy to judge you.
So I think we should talk about it maybe next year.
Okay, so that's an invitation.
Yeah.
And you're welcome. But I think it's interesting, and maybe we should actually ask Henrik, how you as an arts institution receive that invitation to be part of it, and what that makes you reflect. You can reflect on if you want to do that in Denmark, but it could be an interesting dialogue to see, but how does an institution with a public mandate, local money, a local setting, a local context, adapt into a transnational, maybe even an over-transnational, a global strategy from an actor like the CKU? That's an interesting, to me that's an interesting kind of friction, but you can reflect if you want to participate.
I think we can take it in the coffee break if it's too...
But before we just open, we already have a question, so please could we have a microphone to the far end here? Not really, I think you need the microphone.
Hello, my name is Simone. I'm a local artist and been working with the CKU abroad before, and I think that those strategies you're coming up with are solving some of the problems which have been in the past, which is really, really interesting. But what comes to my mind is when you do a project locally in Denmark with actors from outside, I'm wondering how possible, or are you at all interested in local light towers sort of to feed into what you're already doing? Are you interested in people chipping in with what they could participate with, or what possibilities might be in the area where you are working?
I'm not certain that I understood the question, but do you mean Danish local partners or?
Yeah, in this case, we are sort of the exotic local partners.
Yeah.
And what I just experienced from going out doing things, that sometimes it can be difficult to see the local possibilities and the resources. And I'm wondering if, for example, you're coming to Holbæk, how do you make sure that you sort of engage local resources and make them visible to the artists coming to Holbæk to do a project? And are you at all interested in that kind of interaction? Do you understand me now?
Yeah, there is quite some noise up here, so it's a bit difficult to hear. But if we are very much engaged in getting out locally, and both with the art scene and with the normal Danish audience, and that's why also we thought of this strategy of working with local art institutions, because they are the ones knowing their audiences. And as CKU, we are not working in Holbæk or out in Odense normally. So that's why I think it's important to have the local partners buy into our vision. At the same time, we have I think in a way a dilemma, but we're trying to solve it by finding other partners. That our mandate is to work with artists from abroad to bring them to Denmark, and I think the ideal is to make a dialogue between and make both the partners in Denmark learn something and the partners from abroad learn something. But because I'm in the development aid business now, it's all about making the progress outside of Denmark. So, and I haven't found out how we're doing it, but I hope this can be one of the answers, working with local institutions.
I find it interesting that you so deliberately chose to work with international curators, focusing on political activism, focusing on gender, focusing on sexuality, taking kind of, global issues, but very articulated, westernized issues, but twisting them, turning them around and trying to find new angles to them. I think that's an interesting strategy. And I also think that you might be hammering on the nail when the very minute when you're saying, it's a must. I noticed that in your presentation, you said, it's a must to work with international curators. It's not a choice. We only work with institutions and partners who are really willing to distribute that power and go into that dialogue, because I think that's, to some extent, that is the kind of game changer. But you've been here for now 2 days, and the day before yesterday, we heard Paul Goodwin talk about the necessity of opacity, that it was not just all about transparency, but that we actually might want to create spaces which are opaque, and where we're not distributing everything, we're not disseminating everything. It's actually okay not to be completely transparent and inclusive, even in the curatorial practice. So when have you thought about these terms, and have you even thought about, when you're doing the program now, that a term like contemporary is actually quite problematic to work with? Have you touched on that as well?
Yeah, being out and having all these dialogues, we have to rethink the way we use the language, the way we write things, and everything has to sort of be corrected and changed. And I think, in a way, the internet is really good, because you can then rewrite as you're going along. But at the same time, it's really important also to be able to look back and see what was before, what changes have we made, how did we think yesterday. So having this reflexive practice, being able to both look forward and backwards. I don't know if that's an answer.
It is an answer. It is an answer, definitely. Before I just put my last question, is there any more questions in the room that you would like to put? We have a digital question as well.
Oh, wow.
Now, this is getting to be very, very contemporary, even though we killed it the day before yesterday.
Art now, we call it.
The proposed moves may make CKU economically sustainable for the future, and of course moves such as the greater influence by artists from outside Denmark are to be welcomed. But the man putting forward the question thinks that there is a danger of CKU losing the very direct artist-to-artist dialogue and the mutual artistic development strategies, which has been the strength over the last years. So is that part of your reflection as well?
Yeah, and I think, he put the hammer on the nail as well, because, how can we also work with the artist-to-artist relationship? And I think, because, in order to change something, you have to be radical. So now we're trying this new focus, and we have to see what's missing, and how can we then do it better afterwards. But I hope, in working with the local institutions, that they are aware of bringing in local artists and having this dialogue, because
could you do that more than just hope? Could you even maybe emphasize to Henrik and his colleagues that they should?
Yeah, and I think Råderum is doing it. So I think it is being done, but in another length, or sort of CKU is pulling back.
It's not in the central circle, it's kind of the second circle around it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And something we're doing, which I think is really important, is in our contracts, we emphasize that it's important to pay a decent salary both to the artist and to the curators working in the projects. So, and a lot of the institutions we're working with actually do want to make the artist-to-artist collaboration, but they cannot use the CKU money for it, but they have to raise other money for the Danish participants, or participants from other countries. So it's actually also a way of getting the institution to invest in these projects. And my hope is that now it's a lot of, or mostly it's 70-30, so CKU put 70% 20% of the money into the project, and in the future, I hope, hopefully in 2020, we could put maybe 30%, and the institution would see this as so important, so they would come with the
Kind
rest
of their core activity.
Yeah.
Okay. A last question, Michael.
Yeah, my name is Michael, and I absolutely love what CKU does for obvious reasons. My question is, in the spirit of globalization, how does CKU define international artists? Is it the artists that are just from other countries, of course, the ones you've mentioned? How do you marry that with the artists international who have kind of found themselves here for other reasons? Is there a place for that? Are they international? Are they international Danish? Are they localized? You know, all that stuff.
That's a really good question, because it's something we discuss a lot. Do you have to be born in one of these countries? Can you just live in the country, or is diaspora also? So we have to take it case by case. And we are negotiating a lot with the curators, because they ask all these questions all the time. And we do not have the answer, because that's, I think, one of the really difficulties working with geography as a way of saying, well, we can only work with artists from these countries. Well, when are you an artist from this country, and when are you not? So it's, yeah, case by case.
Case by case. This is kind of where we can get today. Thank you very much, Christina.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And